You know that once we start discussing common goods and how to avoid the tragedy of the commons, it's going to come down to human behavior. We talked about institutions, action arenas, action situations, attributes of communities, the biophysical context in which these activities happen, and how our rules and norms and our positions depend on the action situation. Eventually, you have to come to the point of two or more people interacting in certain action situations, could be shared resources, anything, roads, playgrounds, university campuses, and so on. And it's going to come down to making explicit or implicit calculations on how something benefits me versus what is the cost to me. Taxes paid versus opportunities to free ride, being more open about being a good citizen, to help everybody by doing our part, or being just a good citizen by following all the rules and so on. So social dilemmas arise in this context, and it's a very interesting topic, and we will need it to determine the institutional analysis and solutions to solving social dilemmas, so that the outcomes lead to triumphs of the commons and not tragedies of the commons, right? So the key concepts in this chapter, we will learn the concept of social dilemmas, see what selfish and rational individuals do in social dilemmas, be introduced to coordination games, learn to recognize different economic goods and resources, see how the institutional analysis and development framework can be used to study social dilemmas. If you're interested in evolutionary aspects of human behavior, then these ideas offer a very rich background in terms of selfish and rational individuals and what they do in social dilemmas, and how we have evolved to behave in this way, and how there are certain typographies of behaviors and how they may get inherited. So you can read that elsewhere. I have a course on climate and human evolution where some of this comes up, but there are many interesting books on this topic as well. Okay, so let's start with an example. Tropical holiday. You have worked hard during the last few months and long for a relaxing week away from home. You long for a relaxing week away from home. You have booked a holiday on a tropical island thinking it would be a great opportunity to re-energize. You deserve this. A friend who is conscious about sustainability issues wonders why you need to go to this exotic island. The flight alone will consume most of your annual carbon budget, so your friend is making you guilty about your carbon budget. This annual carbon budget is defined as the per person average annual carbon emissions allowed if your country were to meet the emissions levels required to avoid dangerous climate change. So we know, we have other courses where we learn about nationally determined contributions, Paris Agreement, and countries committing to reducing their emissions with mitigation activities and so on. By going on this tropical holiday, you will produce higher than average emissions compared to your fellow citizens. Because of your holiday, others will have to emit less carbon if the nation is to meet its emission targets. You argue that the plane is flying anyhow, so your trip would not really generate an extra amount of emissions. Furthermore, your trip will contribute to employment and economic growth. Why should you suffer by not going to a tropical beach so that the group can meet its sustainability goals? What would you do? This is a bit simplistic in the overall context. In my course on Introduction to Climate Science and Climate Change, Climate Solutions, I talk about the details of such choices, because the plane, if it flies without you, will not consume the same amount if you get on it, because each person adds to the fuel consumption approximately your weight, I think, in per kilometer that the flight goes, because carrying weight adds fuel requirements. So it's not that simple to argue that the plane would be going anyways. Plus, as this blurb says, the trip will contribute to employment and economic growth. Humanity is known for its exploration of the planet as well as now beyond the planet, beyond the solar system, and so on. So there are pros and cons to doing this. Plus, you yourself can carry a portfolio of carbon emissions, so that if you fly, then you can offset your emissions by eating less meat, driving less, and there are many other ways to do this. You can even do offsets by planting trees, which is not always something that works as effectively as one would imagine. So it's complicated, but you get the point about how we have to think about the impacts of our actions on others. In this case, the shared resource is the atmosphere, which gets the emissions, which warms and affects everybody else, right? In terms of heat waves, extremes, cyclones, etc. So let's go into the introduction. In many action situations we experience every day, there often exists a dilemma between what is best for the individual and what is best for the group. For example, it would be beneficial for an individual to be able to use a siren so that all other cars on the road will pull over, allowing the one with the siren to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. It would also be beneficial to an individual not to pay taxes. Nevertheless, society would not function if everybody used a siren when they drive, or they did not pay taxes. In general, society will not function if individuals do only what is best for themselves alone. This is called the social dilemma. So the siren is meant for a dignitary or a president who has to get somewhere fast, or the ambulance which has to take a person to the hospital, or the police who are getting to crime sites, or firefighters, and so on and so forth. And taxes are paid to maintain the roads, infrastructure, dams, energy, etc. So you know why you pay taxes, and there are ways in which you try to minimize, but if you try to avoid it, there are penalties involved. So there are top-down controls in terms of government rules and regulations, and there are bottom-up pressures you feel about your role in the society as a tax-paying citizen, right? So there are more details in the introduction. I'm just taking some part of the text, so you can always go and read. So let's think about what the human behavior is all about. Are they always selfish? Are they always thinking about what is best for them? Are they always doing things for money? Not necessarily. So this is the example of Wikipedia, which is a free resource available. They will bug you once a year or so to contribute as much as you can. So they give you options, and if you use the resource often enough, you may feel guilty and pay up, or you may be a free rider saying it's available, so why should I pay? Let somebody else pay, right? The very existence of Wikipedia demonstrates that we do not all behave as selfish, rational beings. Many people now use Wikipedia because it's a very powerful resource with high quality information on many topics. There are fewer people who write articles for Wikipedia than there are people reading Wikipedia articles. So those who contribute are making their knowledge freely available. They're investing their time and energy to give you a service. Those people who only consume Wikipedia free ride on the contributions of others. So free ridership is a key aspect in social dilemmas. Those who write articles spend time, experience a cost by spending their time and energy to doing this in terms of contributing to Wikipedia for free. Luckily, there are enough people willing to make a contribution voluntarily in order to have a very useful product. If people are fundamentally selfish, why do you think these individuals contribute to Wikipedia? Of course, there are details, again, evolutionary aspects, which says you get a sense of tributary power by being a contributor to Wikipedia. People know you are a contributor, then gives you some sense of pride and power or whatever. So these sorts of details matter in terms of the details of how we got to this place in terms of behavior, rationality, free ridership, and so on. But in this context, we'll come back to social dilemma for resource management. So another key point here, although policymakers have discussed climate change, so we are jumping to climate change, which is the context for the book itself and the book of and all the work of Elinor Ostrom, because population growth, climate change impacts have begun to affect shared resources in a way that we need to worry about human behavior and sustaining the common goods, right? Um, so although policymakers have discussed climate change for more than 20 years, global emissions continue to increase almost every year. A report is out again from, I think, the UN, maybe WMO, reporting that the emissions up to the end of 2022 have shown no sign of slowing down. They are even accelerating. This is an example of a social dilemma, and there are many like it that cannot be solved by voluntary contributions alone, indicating that regulations to stimulate action, such as lower energy use, are needed. That's why we will talk about rules and norms in later chapters. We may need to use rules and norms to overcome social dilemmas. So just relying on people's goodwill and rational behavior and willingness to do their part, do their duties, keeping in mind everybody else's costs and benefits, that doesn't work. We know that very well. So it's a question of how to impose rules and norms that make it possible to sustain the commons. Okay, that's the key message we'll have from this chapter. We will come to prisoner's dilemma. Maybe I should move it to the next podcast because it's a very interesting concept and it's a very simple paradigm or a metaphor for how people behave based on the information they have. It's like the inequality in action situations that we talked about the Sushan boy versus the shinee, or the guy who was getting the Sushine. And so we'll come to this in this context and build our knowledge base to see how we will get to having rules and norms to deal with social dilemmas. So we'll look at battle of the sexes, prisoner's dilemma, and various examples of how human behavior gets elicited in different action situations. Okay, so we'll come back and do that in the next podcast.